Okay, I wanted to thank Janine and Andrea first of all for the description that they gave of the pathway itself. Just their walk down the pathway is very similar to our process that we've gone through, looking at challenges and looking at ways to address those challenges, very similar to the approach that we've taken. So that's a very good description. What I'm going to do is get a little bit more concrete about some of the ways that we've actually looked at some of our challenges, the ways that we've addressed those. A little bit of history, about 3 years ago we started a STEM Academy at Mount Lebanon High School, and the goal of the STEM Academy was simply to increase career and college awareness for students who are interested in STEM fields. And the way that we wanted to do that was by looking at our curriculum and seeing if our curriculum was appropriate for these students, and also looking at extracurricular activities to make sure that they were prepared for careers in college. And right at that same time when we were entering into this, the STEM pathway was being developed. And so I met up with Alana Kalisa, who a lot of you guys know, talked with her about the STEM pathway and said, how do we get on board with this thing? How do we figure out if our curriculum, our programs are as good as we think they are? How can we say we have a STEM Academy if we've never truly evaluated our STEM pathway? So we got involved in this and we did some research. We put together a great team, and 4 of them are here with me today. Caitlin Hogel, who is a middle school math teacher, Adam Humes, who's an elementary school science teacher, Andrew Kuskell, who is a high school tech ed teacher, and then Kelly Sesterniak, who is a middle school principal. These are some of the 10 people that have worked together to, first of all, evaluate our programming and then help come up with solutions. When we went through the rubric for the pathway, one of the things that we noticed was in component 6, which is real-world connections. I'm sure everybody has the components memorized, right? Component 6 is real-world connections. We noticed that we were lacking pretty significantly in that area, particularly with things like corporate connections or career awareness. We realized that was a problem for us. We didn't really focus a lot on that. So what we decided to do was to figure out a way to tackle that. How could we go about a really concrete way to increase career awareness and real-world connections? And so as part of our STEM Academy, we developed this Lunch and Learn program. And the goal of the Lunch and Learn program is really to facilitate these connections. That's really the goal of it. The tricky part, and I don't know if anybody's trying to do this yet, it sounds great. Like you think of a Lunch and Learn program, you're like, okay, we're gonna have kids meet with people from STEM fields, maybe people from colleges, and it sounds great on paper, and then you stop and you think, well, how do I make those connections? Like, how do I find those people to come into our school to meet with students? And you sit there and it's just crickets. There's how do you do that? How do we do that? So that was probably the most challenging part of this, and we had to rely on a lot of different resources. We had to look at some of the connections that we already had, parents in the district that might be involved in STEM careers. We looked at some colleges that we already had some connections with through different programs that they had offered. We looked at other people that had gone out and done guest presentations to schools, to classrooms. And we also looked at some of the resources that Tony had mentioned. When we go to conferences, when we go to workshops, or if there was an opportunity for something like the networking series, anything like that that came up, we took advantage of that and shamelessly kind of promoted our programming to people and said, could you come in and talk to us? Would that be something that you'd be willing to do? So if you look at the paragraph that's at the top of the handout that's got the little logo at the top with the fork and pencil on it, right? If you look at that paragraph, that was something that we crafted pretty carefully, and it's basically our elevator speech. This is something that Tony helped us to work on, that we needed something like this. We needed an elevator speech where you could very quickly just come in and say to somebody, all right, here's what we do, here's what we're interested in, can you help us out? So that was kind of difficult to come up with, but once we developed that, we felt pretty comfortable, and we started to get some bites, some people that were interested in coming in and talking to students. And if you look at the rest of that handout, it's got a little bit of a description of the format. We bring people in, they present in a classroom that's right next to our cafeteria. Students just get their lunches and they walk in and listen to these guest speakers. We advertise these through a number of ways. We have a STEM Academy email that we send out, an email blast that we send to about 90 students every time we have one of these Lunch and Learns come in. We also advertise it on the announcements in the morning. We advertise it to science teachers. We advertise it to guidance counselors. And on the second page, on the back of that, I put together, I think, 5 of the ads that we use. Just little kind of, quirky little things to catch people's attention so they can understand what the program is going to be about. The success that we had in the first year was pretty significant. We had 16 different speakers come in, and there's an example, you can see examples of the types of speakers that we had on that handout. The program's running again this year. One of the interesting things that happened when we started the program the second year is that kids started to ask me at the beginning of the year, are you going to do that again? Are you going to do those lunch and learns again? Which was great. The surprising thing was that 5 people from last year, 5 of the organizations from last year emailed me and said, we want to come back, we want to do that again, we think that was a great opportunity. So that was really a benefit. I thought that was pretty terrific. So we have 19, we did 16 the first year, we have 19 scheduled for this year, and we have 2 openings in May that we're waiting to fill. So those are all in the works. But there have been some bonus activities that have come out of this as well, because we're interested in career awareness, and the Lunch and Learn does serve that purpose. It does make students aware of careers. But the second thing that came out of this is that some of the groups that we met with said, well, we'd like to go a little further with this. For example, the University of Pittsburgh was one of our guest speakers, and they said, well, how would you like to come down to Pitt and tour our School of Engineering? So we took some kids this year to Pitt and toured their School of Engineering. Axion Labs, that's on there, one of the groups that's a kind of an IT firm. When we were done with that lunch and learn, a couple of the kids talked to the presenters and said, I'd really like to come out and visit your facility. I'd like to find out what you do. So we're starting some shadowing experiences based off of these lunch and learns. So it's actually progressing even further than we thought it was. So this is just one example of how the pathway can actually produce concrete results. As Janina and Andrea said, I mean, it's hard. It's really, you're looking at this, you go through the pathway, you fill out the rubric, and you're done with it, and you're like, wow, what do I do now? You know, we found out that we're only progressing in some of these areas. We're only emerging in some of these areas. What do we do now? And Tony's been great with working on action plans and coming up with concrete ways that you can actually chip away at these things. You can actually improve. And we've been in the pathway for 3 years, and we're seeing progress. We're seeing improvements in different components of the rubric based on the work that we've done. So we're pretty happy with how things have gone. I hope that gives you a little bit of a glimpse how you can actually use the pathway to come up with concrete solutions and make progress, actually.